Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to TLDC. I am Rubina Halwani. I'm an instructional designer, and I've been in the field for about 8 years now. I came in by way of being a teacher first and did a couple of other things in my career along the way and landed in this wonderful place in Utah, which is under about 18 inches of snow right now. So I love that part. Um, but it is a wonderful place for instructional designers to be and to grow. And I just have had really good opportunities working here. And I just wanted to tell you guys about my latest project. Um, and just kind of go from there. So good morning, everyone here on the show. So
I love this topic. Like, I am super, super excited about this topic. I think this topic is something that so many people ask about. I'm new to e-learning. I'm new to instructional design. How in the heck do I get started? What does that look like? So I really appreciate you being here, Rubina, to talk about this topic, because I think it's so important just to talk about kind of how you get started on it.
yeah, how you kind of get your feet wet. So just to let you know, I do have about 8 years behind me. I've worked in some other places before. So if you find yourself as a new instructional designer, kind of getting your feet wet and trying to start this from the get-go, it can be very, very trying. Not impossible, but it can be very difficult since you don't have the experience that you may need. So this may actually hit closer to folks that are at least 3 years in, I would say, just to go through some life cycles of instructional design processes and things like that. So you have some experience to kind of work on. And really after that, you're probably a lot more comfortable doing this kind of a thing. So to begin with, I work for the state of Utah, and this is a first-time instructional design team is being formed for my specific department. So I work for a huge acronym on top of acronym. So it's for the state of Utah in the Department of Human Services. And underneath that, in my specific department, I work for the Department of Substance Abuse and Mental Health. And it's the first time that they are creating an e-learning program there. So I had interviewed off and on for a couple of months, from beginning in, I believe, late September, early October, and then I got hired in November and then started. I had a really good interview, and a lot of questions that I raised at the time when I heard that this was new for them. I wanted to kind of find out if there were other e-learning teams in the state of Utah and other places. They had mentioned that there were, and because of that, they wanted to build one here. So they did have some knowledge of the e-learning world based on some other trainings that were already developed in partnering agencies. However, this was a first time for all of them. It is a group of directors that are specialists in their fields of research and want to inform their own employees and providers about different research that they're developing. And they do live training. However, maybe some of you know as well, live training for an entire state of peoples or groups of peoples at different occasions can be very cumbersome to plan, can be very cost intensive to do. They can run several days. And so they were looking at their budgets and just trying to see if there's any other way to disseminate information to their employees and to providers throughout the state without all of that. And then also, time and travel is a big, huge expenditure as well. So they opened up a position for an instructional designer. At the time when I was interviewing, they were looking for one person to do both the instructional design and the LMS. I had followed up with the committee and the folks that were hiring, and I had actually asked them about that. When I saw the job announcement, it was a very, very lengthy request, as maybe you have seen as well too. If you're interviewing for places, it's a laundry list of wishes, I say. And if you're a really experienced instructional designer, at least 3 to 5 years, really pay attention to those job announcements as they come to you, because especially if folks are looking at this for the first time and hiring people like us for the first time, they kind of need to depend on our expertise too, to say, wow, this is a lot of tasks for one person to do. Evaluate the job announcement, kind of take a look at it, and assess it for your best benefit. And so I had mentioned that this is something I can do, both LMS and instructional design. However, I'm stronger in instructional design. That is, where I spent most of my time up until now. I don't have as much experience in the LMS other than uploading the courses and publishing them out. And so I did express a concern that this would also be taxing for whoever you hire if you hire just one person. They really appreciated those comments, and based on those comments, with the applicant pool that they had, they decided to hire 2 people instead of 1, and that was pretty unique for them to do and for them to get approval on, and it worked for my benefit. They decided to hire me as their lead instructional designer, and they decided to hire a second person that they had in the state for a long, long time, my partner, for instructional design, but also for him to lead on the LMS direction. And so for both of us to join on, we started roughly about the same time. He started about maybe 2 or 3 weeks ahead of me, but did wait for me very politely to make, basic decisions. And that was it. It's a team of 2 plus our boss, and then that's it. A very, very skeleton crew. So those were the processes of leading to the interview. And before I continue forward, if you have any questions on that, let me know, and I can address that and then kind of move on. There's lots of other things to touch on this morning.
Rubina, I have a question about that, because I think it's really smart how you did that, how you just basically looked at that, told them, hey, listen, this is definitely more than one person should be doing. Do you have any tips for people that are not in that situation? Because I feel like that is kind of the norm of asking for that unicorn, if you will, of everybody that can do everything in learning and development. So do you have any tips for people maybe just getting started, or people that are looking kind of for their first ID job, of like things to look for, of what should be in that bucket and what should be maybe a different piece?
Yeah, really. Even if you're new to instructional design, and this may be a first type of job for you that you're interviewing for, not specifically my job that I was doing. They were looking for somebody a little bit more advanced, and they mentioned that. But even if you're looking at that first job, I was there, we were all there. It can be a laundry list of wishes and wants, and you not only are you intaking questions and answering them in the interview session, but you have a really neat opportunity to also ask them questions about everything that's written in that job, and just kind of ask them, very politely, but ask them, do you know that there's one person who can do all of these things? Or perhaps phrase it as, there are a lot of things here in this job list. Here are my strengths. Here's what I'm really, really good at. And here are the things I'm willing to learn, and how soon I can learn these other types of tasks. Like I had told them, if you're looking to hire one person for that particular position, I said, I'm really, really strong with Articulate Storyline, my authoring tool of choice. I can, write a course in this amount of time and this amount of length and publish it at this point. However, for me to learn the LMS from the beginning, it would take some time, and it would probably take about this many months for me to learn it properly and for me to perform this task that you want me to do. And so I would ask them, how soon do you want courses to be published? What is your timeline looking like? And different places have different budgets and different wishes and wants. Maybe the interviewer is thinking about that for the first time when you raise that question. You know, how many courses do they want to publish in 1 year? What do they project? What do they see? And then really kind of have a discussion. Try and take it away from having an interview to just having a discussion about the specific wishes and wants that are on the list, and try to just tackle them as best as possible. It'll be really nice for them to hear your thoughts. It really will.
Sorry, I'm just giggling at what Joe has said here in the side. She says that's the thing. They want a unicorn, but they pay for an old donkey.
I hope I'm not the old donkey.
No, I think you had the foresight to understand that it was definitely more than just one role. So no, I don't think she meant that by any stretch of the imagination. That's not the way Joe Cook is. She's a sweetheart. So let's maybe move into talking about, so you got the job, you kind of got this team, you have a skeleton crew, which I can certainly appreciate. I am also on a skeleton crew as well. You know that there's other kind of examples of what the e-learning team may look like. What's the next step here? So you guys are onboarded, you've started. What happens next?
Yeah, so I'm onboarding at the same time as I'm starting, which was really funny. And then, you know, I come into training and development in this particular agency, and they don't have any training for onboarding, which is a whole other thing, because now my second training is onboarding training, so that I could develop that out for other employees here, which is kind of fun at the same time. But so I was onboarding. I'm learning things where we're trying to get our software, and because I've gone through some life cycles before, I really pulled into my experience, and I'm like, okay, what do we need in order for us to build a course from scratch, essentially? So I knew we needed to build out an LMS system. And so my partner, Paul Putnam, I just want to say hi and thank you. He is an LMS guru. And he had been with the state for a very long time, and he had joined to help with that part of it and with the instructional design as well. But he knows it. He knew the LMS system that we were using. We're using Saba, if anybody's familiar with that. It is a really nice system. It's huge. It offers you lots and lots and lots of features. And it's quite expensive. So given your given the department that you might be working for, the company you might be working for, you may or may not be working with this kind of a tool. But I love it. I just don't know anything about building an LMS system. So I really did defer to his experience to do that part. And it did take a huge chunk of time. I would say by the time we had finished building our first course, about 6 weeks in, is when he was about ready to give it the launch that we wanted for the first training. And then we also had a list of different trainings that we were handed, and kind of were able to make the decision of which training should we build out first. Should we do an internal training for internal employees? That was going to be roughly about 60 people, so a little bit lighter than some of the external trainings that we would have to build. External trainings can go between 100 to several hundred people. And so we had, sat and discussed it. And asked if we could create the internal training, do kind of a soft launch on the LMS, test everything out. If we have any kind of issues or whatnot, we can troubleshoot those without too much embarrassment, because it'll go to our internal employees over at DeSama. And so we asked for that. Leadership granted us that wish, so that's what we did. The first training was roughly, it was a live training, a PowerPoint training, just about HIPAA rules and whatnot, and then some specific things to DeSama working with substance use disorder patients. And so the leadership asked if we can create a 30-minute course. And so while Paul was working on the LMS side and building that up and out and adding employees in and whatnot, and troubleshooting and designing essentially the dashboard and what things should look like, I was working on the actual content and a little bit of research and layout and authoring tool. We did get to pick it together. I had recommended Articulate Storyline since I was familiar with it. Paul came from a Captivate background, but was interested in learning storylines, so he was open to the opportunity to work with me and learn from me, so that we could build in Storyline. And we were just both comfortable in that decision, and that's just what we picked. It probably wouldn't have mattered what we picked for an authoring tool if it's just what we were specialized at. So I'm waiting for the software to come in. It took about 2 weeks after my hire for that software to come in. Paul had been there probably about a month for that software to come in. So we're just like all itching and waiting for it, but it takes time working for the state for things to go through their channels and whatnot and to get it approved. But we did. In the interim, I didn't just fill my days doing onboarding training. I really did want to start with the 6-week timeline. And I picked 6 weeks, if you're not familiar, to do a 30-minute course, roughly about level 2 intermediate interaction. Between a level 2 and a level 3, I decided that it would take about 4 to 6 weeks to build. And there's a couple of different websites I can throw up there at the end of the talk of how you calculate your time for building e-learning training. That's about a 30-minute course and whatnot. I had a PowerPoint, I had an SME. We decided to do our initial kickoff meeting with our SME, get the content that we needed. However, the live training that was created for a different audience. I had to curtail that to our audience and then start researching. So in the interim of waiting for software to come, I decided to go ahead and start drafting out the content outline that I needed to create for this specific audience. And then just build things as they were going. And so our boss was really impressed that we were able to build without even having an authoring tool. And our boss comes from outside of e-learning. So he does not know instructional design at all, other than the fact that he wanted to have e-learning courses to save money for the state. Typically in a typical setting, someone above you knows something about training and development and about timelines and about project management, and he knew none of that. So he really did have to defer to Paul and myself to make those kinds of decisions and project management decisions. So that was also an experience and a learning opportunity there. Are there any other questions at this time that I can answer about what I've mentioned so far?
We have a great one from Sonia, but I don't know. I feel like this might be more of a summative question, so I'm going to hold on to that one right now. But I do see it, Sonia, and it's a great question. I do have a question when you're talking about kind of the pilot testing piece. I also think that's another place where a lot of people stumble when they start, because it's like, what should I be testing? Who should I be testing it with? What is kind of, if you don't mind, just to explain a little bit more, like how did you kind of define that test ground? Like what did that pilot test look like? What were some of the things that you had the folks going through check? Because I always think it's interesting to hear kind of what people test in courses.
Yeah, so I mean, I had a really nice full list of about, I think, 7 to 10 different types of trainings. And you know, our department was very nice and lovely and very um, um, you know, excited to work with us. And they were very open, and they were allowing us our autonomy and allowing us to give in our expertise of what course should we try to do first, and what course to build and what course to launch. They did come up with an external training first, because of course we're trying to do things um, for the department. However, we had asked, can we try this type of course, just because I had more insight into content knowledge of a HIPAA course. I know that I could go to solid resources, solid websites, department websites, agency websites, government websites to get any other information that I needed to get. I knew that I could work fairly well with the SME. There's a little bit of juggle there about how much you let them control the content versus you. So there were some decisions there about that. And I really did, you know, I had some initial meetings. I had the SME give final authority on content. I would take final authority on design and layout. And Paul was just leading everything that had to do with SABA decisions and whatnot. He was building out more of the lists, the internal lists. We had to get all of the employees, like who are we going to give this to. Once we found out it's about 60 people, we felt that, you know, it's not 100 or 200 people, it's not 20 people, it fits about right for a pilot course. So factoring those decisions, and once I saw the content from the SME and figuring that I can make it in a certain amount of timeline and deliver it, that really appeased the powers that be. And so they were okay with us kind of driving that decision and doing that pilot. I'm not sure if we had really big stumbling blocks. There were things that Paul was learning about SABA as well, about the LMS system and how to build some things, just kind of very silly things about the picture. Oh my gosh, when we put the picture on the dashboard, what picture do we pick? We're pulling things out of air almost. It's like, how do we want this to look to the end user? That was a big thing for us. We really did want things to look very nice and presentable and engaging. But how do you define nice? How do you define presentable? And what is engaging to the learner? And so during my onboarding, I got a sneak peek at some of the other mandatory trainings that internal employees had to take that were built from other departments. When I saw that, I realized I could build training to meet the learner need in a qualified and in a really, really nice, sleek way. And perhaps, you know, show some new things that they hadn't seen before based on the training that was already there and already published from other departments. And so, you know, I didn't want to put my ego too high, but, you know, when I saw it, when I took it, you know, little mandatory trainings, And I'm like, oh my gosh, I could do this a little bit better than the way it was currently designed. And my boss asked me, he asked me quite a bit. He was like, hey, so you just took that training. I'm like, yeah. What did you think of the design? What did you think of the layout? I'm like, this was good. This was not. This was better. This was not. This is old. I could tell that, this happened. I understood why the designer made this design, because back then, and a few years ago, that's how everybody was making it. This is where I'm at now, and this is how I'd like to make it more modern or more clean, or try some other types of fun things in the design. We had those kinds of conversations, and it was really fun. It was very exciting and thrilling of like, what do we want branding to look like? What do we want logos to look like? What logo do we pick? For things. How do we design the storyline player? And there's this one time that Paul and I are meeting, and we're just going through the player, and we're like, okay, these are the decisions. We're just going to go through it together. We threw that up on one screen. We're sitting down on our screens, and we're like, okay, we're just going to make this decision and this decision and this decision to make it look like this. And we're just checking with each other. Do you like it? All right, sure. Do I like it? Okay, cool. So, and then that's it, really. I mean, and there were like, what was it? I actually calculated 80 different decision points that you can make on just how do you set up your player. And if I'm sitting by myself, I could totally go, oh yeah, I'm going to design it like this. And you really don't think about it. When you're designing with a team, especially with somebody else's input and somebody else's wishes and wants, or somebody else's just there's some decisions to make there. And it's just kind of, what are you choosing? How are you choosing? Or just choose just to choose, because you have to choose and then move on. Let's try it this way this time. And then if we don't like the way the player looks, we're the designers. We can go back and try it another way. So it was fun. It was hard because it feels like visually, it felt like I was in a fog, and trying to break out and see the colors afterwards and stuff, and like paint something from scratch. And so it was kind of interesting to go through that.
I can completely empathize with what you just said, because for me, like, my bliss and passion is going in, being creative, making those interactions, making the experience. I don't give two hoots what color the player is or whatever. Like, that's something that someone else on my team makes the decision on. But for me, just like, let me go in, let me do my thing, and then y'all can fight over the details. But you're absolutely right. There are so many little decisions.
Initial
like
things that you have to do. Yeah. And it's like, and I don't care, like, I didn't care what it was, but I was like, well, what will Paul think? Maybe he does care or something. And he probably the same exact thing. Like he's like, I really don't care. Let's just pick something. But it's interesting because like there's little things in our heads a mile a minute of decisions that you can make. And you want to build it together if you have a partner, like I do, and you want to build it respectfully so that nobody's toes are getting stepped on and whatnot. You'll be surprised what people care about that you didn't even realize that they care about. Branding, and logos, I think, were the biggest topics that we had to deal with. That's about it. We did have a branding guide to work with. We didn't have to build that from scratch, so that was fine. There were some color schemes and things like that from Department of Human Services that were already preset. But other than that, inside of the course, what font are we going to use? Well, so I go surfing on, okay, what's a font? And knowing my experience, I want a sans font because that's just going to run better to the end user and for us and whatnot. And I think if I was first-time instructional designer, I may or may not have known to do that. I may have thought, oh, let me just put pretty fonts, whatever I like. But now I've learned over time not to do that. Try a sans font, and then I go to Google and I'm searching a bunch of different fonts and just picking one and then checking with Paul, and he's like, yeah, sure, let's go for it. Um, and then just telling everybody else, this is what we're doing, this is what we're building, and this is what we have, and there you go. Um, and and mostly it was yays because they didn't know enough to say nay. So so that worked out in our favor. Um, and things were a little bit more smoother along because they did defer to our experience, which I wish that would be so possible in everybody's job. You know, like that would just make life so much easier if everybody did defer to the instructional designers for decisions. Yeah.
But so many times the instructional designers have to fight for that expertise. I always like to say that I feel like instructional design is like driving. Like everyone
Mhm.
thinks they're a good driver, but we know that that's not the case. And, you know, the fact that people, I think a lot of times think it's easy or just throw it into PowerPoint, put in a tool. I don't care. You know,
Yeah.
I feel like that's definitely also another pitfall. A lot of newer folks fall into that is like, you know, they have their hat on. Oh gosh, I'm an ID. Like I'm so eager to do it. But then they get that pushback from management. So I love what you've said about kind of the expertise model, like really owning that and really leaning on your leadership. I really appreciate what you said about the project management piece.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, making smart decisions like that can really set you up for success in the long run. Because if you don't set those kind of boundaries in the beginning, you're going to get ran over.
Absolutely. I think in terms of project management, it has to be a shared process between you and your bosses or your project manager or whoever you're reporting to deliver your work to. It if you're feeling that you've just been handed something and you're feeling queasy about either the deadline or the type of work or the specific task, whatever it is, whatever your deliverable is or whatever your timeline is, if there's something uneasy about that, let's say it always happens that, you know, you'll get the task, you'll get the deadline. The deadline is so much closer than it takes for you to actually do the task. And you need to go back and say, hey, actually it would take somebody to do it in a really nice way this amount of time. However, if I don't have that kind of time, then either help me figure out how to get to your deadline, or can we negotiate to get somewhere in between in terms of content or design or layout or whatever it is that you kind of are skeptical about. And you really do need to have those open conversations with them. Sometimes a lot of, in my experience, you know, I've gotten both good and bad experiences, I should say, and it's been about 50-50. Sometimes I've gotten pushback. You know, whatever the end deadline is for publishing, it's a hard deadline, and we really just don't have time to give you extra time. What can you build in this amount of time? That is the expectation. That's what you have to do. So then you have to make some internal decisions of, well, maybe I can do this, but not that. And you do your trade-offs. Otherwise, you'll have project managers who aren't in the design field, perhaps. Maybe they're in marketing or business or whatnot. And they may not know. They may not genuinely know how long it takes you to actually build something out. And so if there's something wrong with the deadline that they've given you, just discuss it out really before you start. Having that discussion in the beginning and knowing where your leeways are or aren't will help you get through that project a little bit better, at least if you've discussed your concerns up front, or as soon as you realize them. It's just so much better to kind of address it in the beginning than to go back at the end and say, oh, well, of course, like, but you didn't give me enough time. And the project manager is probably like, I didn't know you needed more time, you know. Things like that happen. So as best as you can, if you're newer, try to start having those conversations, perhaps not on your first training or second training. You're probably still learning the ropes, but after you've gotten a couple underneath your belt, you know those life cycles, you know what's to expect, and say, okay, you know, in that last training, it actually took me this amount of time. I would like to chart that in for this next training. maybe going forward, you can manage your time a little bit better, and just have those discussions as you go and you grow. There were also some project management tools that we used. I see some things coming up on the screen about that. We used Trello as our choice project management tool. And most of our stuff is housed, if anybody had any questions, on Google. So we're really using cloud-based stuff, softwares and things like that. So Google worked well with Trello, so Trello was approved, and so we used Trello as our project management tool. We downloaded that probably a month into the course building. After I was finished with the first course, all of the creation of the course, things were kind of like, we were learning as we went how long things took in actual. And so I did a retroactive, I took about maybe 2 or 3 hours retroactively to count back the timeline of how long it took to do certain parts. I probably would have started in the beginning, but we didn't have the software in the beginning. But I did do it retroactively, and my boss asked me, do you feel that it's worthwhile to still do? I said, absolutely. For time and tracking and resource, and for the next projects that I'm going to be working on, I really want to know how long it did actually take to do certain things in this project. Not so much to kind of, hold ourselves accountable to certain things, or watch us, or get into the minutia of details and micromanage. It was nothing about that. It was really just learning, how long does it take for me to build this scenario? How long did it take me to build this module? How long did it take us to actually build? Did what we project match the actual timelines? When were we on time? When were we off time? This was an internal kind of driven thing for our first experience. But I still wanted to hit around the 6-week mark. And around the 6-week mark, things got a little bit, antsy. We're like, are we going to make it? Are we going to make it? And luckily for us, we did. But it was really helpful so that I can have really good discussions the next time I'm building something. And for me to say, I really did this in this amount of time. I would like this amount of time next time I build something very similar. So, or I took this amount of time, maybe 4 hours to build something. Maybe the next time I use that template, and then it will take me 2 hours to build it, or something like that, something along those lines. So hopefully that helps some other folks in that realm of decision making.
So a follow-up question to that, because I know for like my own self, the two things that are the biggest derailers of my productivity on working on a course is, number one, somebody wanting to add something after a storyboard has been approved. So after I've already approved it, got the SME to sign off on it. Oh, by the way, I want that. Yes, absolutely, Sonia. I do say that it's out of scope, but where I am not the owner of the learning function. Yeah. The faculty are. So yes. Unfortunately, I do not have, yes, it is very tough. That's a whole nother topic for another day. So that's number one. Number two is just having, like, let's say you have your day planned out. I'm going to work on building stuff from like 8 a.m. to like 11 a.m. and blah, 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 blah. And then you have these other things that derail your day. So that's the number two thing that happens to me all the time. Oh, you need to go to this meeting about this today, or, oh, your boss is out, you need to do this today. I find that very frustrating. So when you guys were doing this with your 6-week course design, what were some of those hiccups? Like, what were some of the things that kind of took away kind of your timeline? What sucked your deadline?
Yeah. Very, very good questions. Thank you very much. So the first one is we actually did have some input. So when we got to the 6-week mark, I thought we were done. We have this course ready. We're good to launch. The SME is approving it, and that's all that matters. And You know, my boss is approving it. He's looking at it too. My partner's looking at it. You know, I dotted my I's, I crossed my T's, you know, everything, spell check, you know, and everything. And so we're good to go. Well, leadership then is about 6 to 8 heads. And we wanted them to take the course and see what they thought. And I thought we were done. Well, so they look at the course, they think about the course, and they're like, wait a minute, there's a discussion missing. Or this is what they came back with us to say. There's a discussion missing in there. And so I had no idea. My SME, actually, in all of his earnest, also had no idea. And so I had to, you know, kind of consider it. Is this scope creep? First, I'm listening to leadership to figure out what it is that they wanted in the course. Then we're having internal discussions with my boss and my partner once they had left to kind of evaluate you know what the wish was, what is it that they wanted us to do with the course, what is it that they wanted to add in. They did want to add in one extra discussion on a certain topic. And my first thought, if it's an internal deadline, my first thought is it the best for the learner? Does the learner need to know this? I kind of start from that vantage point. Is it important for them to know? Do they need to know this now? Can this content be delivered in another training later or not? We had really good feedback from the leadership team on the other parts of the course. They thought it was wonderfully designed. There was nothing there that we needed to touch or retouch. It was this added piece someone forgot to give us for whatever reason. And that's what, you know, happened. And that happens all the time. There's a realization of when you see all the parts and pieces come together, there's something amiss. Okay. All right. So, you know, it's a little bit frustrating. Absolutely. You know, I'm a lot more calm today than I was then. I was like, what do you mean? No, I thought we were done. That was me. But honestly, you know, professionally speaking, it isn't my course. It isn't my baby. Once I give it back to them, it's theirs. It's for the department. They have other stakeholders interested in it. You have to remember that you have to keep them in mind. And given what the request was, they just really wanted to add a couple more things in there. I kind of looked at the timeline of how long it was going to take to do that. And then we agreed, okay, we'll take an extra week. We'll go ahead. We'll kind of flush this portion of it out. We'll throw it back to the feedback cycles, and we hope this is it. We do that. We get some other small requests. We say, we're sorry for these other small requests. We're going to have to look at it at our next cycle when we go back to this training. It was going to be a training that we release annually. You know, we'll do another iteration of this training. And at that point, these other little small requests that you're coming up with now will have to go in there. However, we are starting to start on some other projects. We're not going to be able to put that in right now. So that's how we handled those other small requests and how we approached giving them what they wanted for this course. So hopefully that helps you guys a little bit. It's a different conversation. It's a hard conversation to have. It's things to evaluate in your mind. My goal is it the best for the learner? Do they need this right now? If I thought yes, then we go, okay, sure, this is what we have to do. We have to do it. We'll just do it. Yeah.
I'm really sad she left because I think now's the perfect time for Sonia's question, but I will record the answer in the ask a question feature. So she's curious about how do you manage varying priorities among your stakeholders?
Sure. For that, we do have input from our boss, who is our direct line to our stakeholders and our leadership team. And so we have our internal discussions with him. We kind of figure out what our game plan is, what our desire is, and why. And then he acts as our intermediary with leadership or with any other stakeholders that we have, which is a nice thing. And then we kind of then discuss things and negotiate things and whatnot. And then whatever the decision is at the end of all of that, it is what it is, and then we just kind of go forward. So it's been kind of nice in that sense. There have been some other wishes and wants that have come down the line, and I have been firm about saying, no, there's a deadline, we do need to publish. We have taken in some considerations, but at this point in time, we're just not going to be able to deliver that request. We are happy to do that at our next iteration. So that's pretty much that it. I know there was a quick question about other administrative tasks that everybody also has to do in life. Just so you understand, I'm actually at home right now. This is my home office. One of the benefits that I got coming on board for this particular role is that I do get to work remotely for the most part. For most of my days, unless I do have to come in for any kind of meetings or discussions. I try to come in about once a week. The office is a little bit far for me, but by far I'm talking about a 20-minute drive. However, I also have to drop my kids off at school and pick them up at the end, and so it's just a lot for me. I prefer to be at home to have the quiet. If I'm in the office, oh my gosh, my day is shot. Like, there are so many folks coming in and out through the doors, and so it's really hard to get quiet time, focus time, design time, research time, just mind time to think. Really, when I'm in the office, it's more like discuss, decide, do some admin things, and so the real work, what I'd like to talk work, doesn't happen. And so I try to limit the time that I'm in the office, but be accessible as possible. If I do have to come in an extra day, I do, or half a day, I do. Otherwise, I have the autonomy to work offsite. I was given a laptop, and at home I have a computer. Between the two, I'm able to get exactly what I need done. I've got a couple of monitors in my office, and I have Storyline here on my home computer, and I have Storyline on my laptop as well. So between the two, I'm able to function quickly, efficiently, and do what I need to do, and hone in and kind of turn admin stuff off when I need to focus on work, essentially. It's always a balance. If I do have meetings and other things to go to, and I have been, it's not that I'm solely focused on just developing courses. We're also meeting around with other folks in the state. There's a LMS meeting that happens once a month. There's an instructional design meeting that happens once a month. And these are at different places at different times, meaning other people throughout the state that are also instructional designers and also LMS folks. And every now and again, there's a training or something. We always have an open conversation with our boss. He understands that admin stuff is coming, and we always say, okay, all right, well, maybe that'll push a day or two here and there. And otherwise, we do get overtime if we need it. I have rarely ever used it, just because I am able to have a flex time schedule. I don't have to do the normal 9 to 5. I can do my 40 hours whenever, day or night, and I can do my work. Since I've been at this for about 8 years, I think I have a lot of processes I've already figured out, and so I'm able to keep up with that pace. It will be different for everybody. It will be different for a newer instructional designer versus somebody that's been around for a while, because you're building your processes first if you're newer versus somebody who's already been in it for a while. You can have an easier time with that. Yeah.
All right, I want to ask the question I wanted to ask. So I'm curious, like during kind of this whole implementation, what was the biggest failure or goof that you had during the whole thing? And what did you take away from it? Like, what did you learn that you're going to be able to use in other different programs that you stand up?
Um, what was the biggest failure or goof? There's so many. Anyway, um, I think, well, okay, so you spend all this time and you're working and you're designing, and one of the things that wasn't working for us is I built in the storyline that, congratulations, you're finished with the course on the last slide, and now you're going to get your evaluation. And we thought, dotted our I's, crossed our T's, put in all the programming that we did and tested it. And so we test it, we take the course ourselves, we sit through it, everything's locked down, and I click on the evaluation button and it opens up in a new window and I start taking the evaluation. I'm so happy, everything's working great. Well, we give it to our leadership team to also go through it, and we're all ready and whatnot. It doesn't work. For whatever reason, we still to this day still have no idea why the evaluation is not popping up on their screens. And it's so irritating. It's so frustrating. We're like, we programmed it the way we were supposed to program it. We set it, we even tested it. It worked for us. This is good. And it's not opening. That was a frustrating thing. And it's like, we did everything. We still don't know. And so we jimmied it and we did something else. I think Paul set it so that they could get the evaluation after the course. When they complete the course, they'll get an email about the evaluation and asking them to take it and tell us what you thought about the course. And we're still trying to figure that out. And so if anybody's a SABA programmer or familiar with that and can help me figure that out, please let me know. I would love to hear from you. The other thing, the SME on the day of the launch for just the stakeholder, just for leadership to take the course, our SME had some kind of problem not being able to open the course. And I was freaking out because I'm like, oh my God, that's in my department. That's my domain. I don't know what's going on. And I'm clicking every way to Sunday and it works for me. So then I'm like, well, what is going on? What is happening? An hour later, he comes back. User error. I'm so sorry. It was me. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, that was so stressful. But it was really funny. And he found out that like something he just didn't have updated on his computer or whatnot. And so once he updated, he was totally fine. But that was really just kind of funny. And I was like, you know what? Next time, instead of looking internally into figuring out the problem 10 ways to 1, maybe I should go over there and just take a look and see what's happening on their screen to kind of sort it out. So anyway, lessons learned. I don't know. It was just kind of fun. Sure. What else can I answer for you?
I think that's all that we had. I was looking back at like what we said we were going to be talking about. I think we hit all of that. So I guess where can people find you? Where can people get more information about this project?
Sure. So look me up on LinkedIn, Rubina Halwani. Catch me up there. You can totally connect with me. One of the fascinating things that I like to do on my LinkedIn is I started this about a year or two ago, like a year and a half ago, to connect with a bunch of people that are in instructional design all throughout the world. So I started getting things on my feed of LinkedIn of possible people you might want to connect with. And I made a strategic decision to connect with anybody who's in instructional design or e-learning or training and development or any of those realms related to. And I love connecting with people. I just ask and I click and I say, please connect with me. Now, I really, really feel that that is just anytime I have some kind of a problem or issue that I have to work on, especially being in this field for so many years, there's always still something very kind of specific that you need to know. I know I can reach out to my cohort there and somebody knows the answer for me. So I really love that as a resource. So thank you. Other than that, I'm looking forward to attending a couple of conferences this year. I'm still deciding which ones. On the horizon of possibilities is the Learning Dev Camp here in Salt Lake City that is in June every year. And so I love that, one, because it's in my backyard, two, because it's fairly intimate and small. It's got the best folks of L&D that come out. It's really great. It's a wonderful time of year. It's warm. The weather is nice. So if you can come out there, meet me. I may be doing a talk there. We'll see. And I may be heading out to Learning Solutions in March, at the end of March, just so that I can learn some solutions to problems that I may be facing now as we're going and growing and developing and wanting to build out a little bit more. That's our next thing on the horizon, I guess our next wish and want that we want to do. So that's where I'll be. So hopefully I'll see you guys there. A couple of things before we leave. I did want to say thank you to my boss and everybody over at the Department of Human Services for the state of Utah. It is a really nice thing that they're allowing me to come and talk and kind of share from my experiences, depending where you are and what businesses you guys are working with. You may or may not have this kind of an opportunity to talk about those processes. So I'm really happy that they were able to allow me to do this. So special thank you to Jeff Merritt. He is our boss and the public information officer for the state of Utah for our department, the DESAMA department. And I love working with him and for him. He's a pleasure. And for Paul Putnam as well. He's been in the state of Utah for about 20 years. He comes with a huge, vast knowledge of training and development and LMS experience and is just a great support for me. We have a really skeleton crew, but a wonderful, wonderful pairing. And I love the support that we get and the fun that we get to have on all the things that we get to build. So thank you.
Love that. I love that you gave a shout out to your team. I think that's so important. So again, thank you so much for being part of TLD Cast. If you're interested in connecting with me, I put my LinkedIn and Twitter in the chat there if you are interested. And you'll love Learning Solutions. I went last year, had a blast. Unfortunately, I'm not going to that this year, but I will be at DevLearn, so I'm excited about that. And again, thank you all so much. And if you want to connect with us more, believe that's the URL, which I need to put obviously in the HTTPS, but that is our Slack channel that's open for anybody that's part of this community. So feel free to join us on there if you want to. And yes, Josh, I'm sad that I won't be there, but it's okay. But anyway, thank you, Rubina. Great information, great conversation. Thank you all so much for being here and enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good one.
You too, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.